All right, welcome. We all know we should probably eat better, get more sleep, and stress a little less. The knowing part? That's the easy bit. But actually doing it, especially when work gets crazy, well, that's the real challenge. So today, we're going to dig into why that gap exists, and more importantly, how we can finally close it. So let's just dive right in with a pretty shocking statistic that really sets the stage. Would you quit your job for your own well-being? Turns out a whole lot of your colleagues would. We're talking 60% of employees, 64% of managers, and get this, a staggering 75% of C-suite executives are thinking about quitting for better well-being support. This isn't just some small trend, it's a massive shift in what people prioritize. And that brings us to our first big point. Well-being is just not a nice to have anymore. It's become totally foundational to performance. The data on this is crystal clear, and for modern businesses, it's pretty much non-negotiable. Let's talk hard numbers for a second. When companies really, truly invest in well-being, they don't just get happier people, they see a 20% jump in productivity. That is a direct line connecting feeling good to performing well. And the financial case? It's just as powerful. For every single dollar a company invests in mental health support for its employees, they see a $4 return on that investment. We're talking a 4-to-1 ROI. I mean, any CFO would celebrate a number like that. But it's not just about output or the bottom line. It's really about the culture. In companies that get this right, almost 9 out of 10 employees, that's 89%, say they're happy and engaged with their work. That's the foundation of a really positive, thriving culture. And here's the kicker. When these programs are holistic, they address the whole person, not just one little piece, the return on investment can just skyrocket past 150%. The takeaway here is undeniable. Investing in your people pays off big time. So this leads to a really big question. If the business case is so strong, if the numbers are so clear, why do so many of these really well-intentioned programs just fall flat? It's a story we've all seen, right? A company brings in this amazing workshop, everyone leaves feeling inspired, and then, a few weeks later, nothing's really changed. Old habits creep back in, and that initial spark is just gone. So why does this keep happening? Well, the answer comes from a really powerful idea in behavioral science. It's called the intention-action gap. It's the perfect way to describe that super frustrating space between what we know we should do and what we actually end up doing every day. And here's the thing. This gap isn't a failure of willpower. It's not about being lazy. It's just a predictable result of how our brains are wired. See, just giving people information, it isn't enough to change behavior. Motivation fades, and without some kind of new system in place, our old automatic habits will win out every single time. And this is the result. Despite all the good intentions and the investment, burnout is still a problem. Engagement hits a wall, and that return on investment we talked about, it never shows up. It's just this cycle of good intentions and, honestly, disappointing results. So how in the world do we break this cycle? Well, that leads us to a completely different approach, one that's designed specifically to close that intention-action gap by building habits that actually stick around. So instead of those one-off events, modern programs follow a really clear, systematic method. First, you translate big, vague goals into outcomes that actually matter in people's day-to-day jobs. Then, you define the specific behaviors that are going to make a difference. Next, and this is key, you enable the change by designing systems that make it super easy. And finally, you measure the progress every step of the way. This slide right here really gets to the heart of it. The new approach isn't about fighting our own human nature. It's about using what we know from neuroscience to work with our brains instead of constantly fighting against them. So for any new habit to really, truly stick, it has to follow 3 simple rules based on how our brains actually work. First, it's gotta be doable. Our brains are wired to be lazy and take the path of least resistance. Second, it has to be remembered. We need cues and prompts because our brains naturally forget things. And finally, it absolutely must be rewarding. We need to see the benefits to stay motivated. So what's the secret sauce here? Well, the first ingredient is applied behavioral science. This just means using proven scientific insights about how people tick to design changes that actually work in the real world. The second ingredient is thinking about the entire organization as one big system. It's not just about what one person chooses to do, it's about all the little cues, the social norms, and the incentives that are shaping our behavior all day long.
This image of the gears illustrates it perfectly. We have to redesign the actual systems of the workplace, the gears themselves, so that the easiest, most natural path, that path of least resistance, is the one that leads to healthy and productive behaviors.
And finally, the third ingredient is sustainable coaching. Look, lasting change isn't a one-time event. It's a process. It needs ongoing reinforcement, practice, and accountability to make sure these new habits can actually survive the pressures of a busy work life. So, we've talked a lot about how this works for organizations, but what does this all mean for you personally? How can you take this same thinking and apply it to your own life? At the end of the day, the biggest takeaway is this fundamental shift in mindset. We've got to stop looking for the next temporary program or the next quick fix. The real goal is to build a system, both personally and professionally, that makes it easy for us to thrive, day in and day out. Just understanding that this gap exists is the very first step to closing it. So we'll leave you with this question to think about. In your own life right now, where is the biggest gap between what you intend to do and what you actually do? Because answering that question, that's where real change begins.